You ever hear something as small as ice settling in a glass and just know your life is about to change? That's how it started for me. Not with a scream, not with a slap, not even a whisper. Just the soft clink of melting ice as my wife, Sienna, stood across the room at her boss's party and raised her cocktail to someone who wasn't me. My name's Dwight. Yeah, like that. Not exactly the hero of most stories. I've got a receding hairline, a sensitive stomach, and I still write checks at the grocery store. I wasn't the type of man people notice when I walk into a room, but I used to believe Sienna did. Until that night. We'd been married 10 years. No kids, no big house, no tragic backstory. Just two people who met at a flea market in Arkansas over a broken Polaroid camera and thought, why not? We used to laugh in bed over dumb commercials. We used to send each other photos of squirrels doing weird stuff in the yard. We used to be us. But lately, she'd been different. It started small. Late hours. Tighter dresses. A sudden obsession with professional networking. Then came the silence. Not angry silence, worse. The kind that settles in slowly, like mold, until one day you realize you haven't really talked in weeks. So when she told me there was a party at her boss Marlon's house and it's really just for the team, I didn't push. I smiled, nodded, said I'd order takeout and catch up on yard work shows. But then she slipped up, left the invite on the printer tray. I saw my name on the RSVP list. I showed up. I wasn't dressed like them. No velvet jackets or slick back hair. I wore my best button-up and prayed nobody noticed the scuffed shoes. When I walked into that marble-coated penthouse, I felt like a mall Santa at a tech startup launch. And then I saw her. Sienna was by the piano, laughing too hard at something Marlon said. Her hand brushed his arm. She looked 10 years younger, or maybe just 10 years freer. For a moment, I wanted to believe it was harmless, that she didn't see me yet. So I walked toward her, heart thumping like I just shoplifted. She turned, and that's when it happened. She looked straight at me, and then past me. Not around me. Not through me. Past me. As if I were some weird piece of furniture they forgot to move. I froze. Gave her a little wave, hoping she'd play it off. Instead, she turned to the woman beside her and whispered something. They both laughed. I approached. Close enough now that she couldn't pretend I wasn't real. Sienna, I said quietly. It's me. She blinked once. Tilted her head like I was a stranger asking for directions. I'm sorry, she said with a shrug. Do I know you? I swear to God, my heart didn't just sink, it evaporated. She turned her back, and I stood there, in front of a floor-to-ceiling window with a view of the whole city, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. Not angry, just hollow. The kind of hollow that makes you forget what your own name sounds like. People say betrayal feels like a knife. They're wrong. It feels like silence, like being invisible, like your presence is so irrelevant it can be erased in real time while people sip wine around you. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked to the bar and sat down. The bartender raised an eyebrow. Rough night? Not yet, I muttered. But it's getting there. I thought that moment would be the lowest point. But 5 minutes later, I overheard something from the hallway, words that weren't meant for me. And suddenly, her pretending not to know me? That was just the warm-up act. I didn't mean to hear it. I wasn't lurking, snooping, or playing detective. I just needed to breathe. After Sienna brushed me off like lint from a collar, I wandered down the hallway, away from the crowd and that humiliating echo chamber of fake laughs and cologne. I found a dimly lit corridor lined with photographs of corporate retreats, Marlon in sunglasses, Marlon with a falcon on his wrist, Marlon shaking hands with someone who looked suspiciously like a senator. I leaned against the wall, trying not to lose it. My palms were damp, my head buzzing. I felt like I had fallen out of my own life and landed in someone else's expensive nightmare. And that's when I heard her voice. It was soft at first, muffled, but unmistakably hers. Sienna was around the corner, talking to someone in hushed, low tones. I didn't plan to eavesdrop, but when you hear your wife's voice after she just pretended not to know you, instinct takes over. I took a step closer. I told you he wouldn't come, she was saying. He doesn't belong here. Never has. There was a pause, then a man's voice. Smooth. Confident. Not loud, but the kind of voice that knows it doesn't need to be. So what if he had? What would you have done? Sienna let out a breathy laugh. Same thing I always do. Acted like he was a stranger. Honestly, it's not that hard. Dwight fades into any room. They both laughed. I didn't breathe. She kept going. It's pathetic, really. He still buys me flowers every third Tuesday because it's the day we first kissed in the rain. Like, who even remembers that? I've kissed Marlon on yachts in New York penthouses in Rome. But Dwight? He thinks a drizzle outside a bowling alley is romantic. I swallowed hard, fighting the sting in my chest. The man chuckled. You're cruel. No, she replied. I'm realistic. He was a pit stop. Marlon is the destination. The words hit me harder than any punch. Pit stop. That's all I was. A placeholder. A gap filler between college fantasies and corporate affairs. I didn't know how long I stood there. Seconds? Minutes? Eventually, I backed away, nearly tripping over a champagne bucket tucked against the wall. I made it to the elevator without being seen. At least, I think I did. My vision was blurred, my hands were shaking, and all I could hear was that awful phrase repeating in my head. He fades into any room. I drove home in silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel. I just stared straight ahead, replaying every memory with Sienna like someone forcefully rewinding a tape they didn't want to watch. And by the time I pulled into our driveway, something inside me cracked, not in anger, but in clarity. She didn't just cheat on me physically. She erased me, piece by piece, in her mind, until she could say those things out loud without even flinching. I sat in the car for hours, and by sunrise, I had a plan. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight. But I was going to disappear in a way she'd never expect. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the car, staring at the porch light I forgot to change 2 weeks ago. It flickered every 10 seconds. The kind of thing Sienna used to nag me about. But lately, she hadn't said a word. About anything. No reminders. No honey-do lists. No small talk about work or which cereal was on sale. We were living in the same house, but I had already become furniture. Background noise. A default setting she never noticed. As the first light of morning broke, I realized I couldn't stay there. Not just in the car, but in this entire life. I've been trying to make something work that was already gone. Maybe it had been for a long time. But now, I had proof. Not in photos or text messages, something colder. Her voice. Her laughter. Her full-on comfort in mocking me to someone else. I wasn't her partner. I was a punchline. I walked inside like a guest. Everything felt unfamiliar. The scent of her floral candles. The pristine countertops I wasn't allowed to touch. The wedding photo by the stairs, slightly tilted. I paused in front of it, looking at my own smile like I didn't know the man in the picture. Maybe I didn't. That morning, I didn't rage or pack a suitcase dramatically. I just started moving. Quiet. Calm. Precise. I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with some clothes, my backup laptop, and a few essentials. Passport. USB drive with important docs. Charger. One photo, just one, from my late dad's fishing trip with me. Everything else? I left behind. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a goodbye text. I didn't post some cryptic message online. I just drove. First aimlessly, then out of town. I stayed off highways and followed old roads through forgotten towns, stopping only for gas and cheap coffee. Somewhere between state lines, I realized what I was really doing. I was giving her what she wanted. I was fading away, but I wasn't doing it out of weakness. I was doing it on my own terms. That night, I checked into a tiny roadside motel under my middle name, Grant. A bland, beige room with a rattling air conditioner and a TV that only played weather channels. Perfect. I needed silence. Meanwhile, I imagined her coming home, walking in with that fake laugh, heels clicking on the tile, already on her phone. Maybe she called Marlon. Maybe they planned a weekend business retreat. And then nothing. No dinner on the stove. No man on the couch. Just empty air. I pictured her looking around the house like she'd misplaced something. Only this time, it wasn't keys or sunglasses. It was me. I imagined her checking her phone. No texts. No missed calls. The silence, for once, would be hers to sit in. I didn't vanish to scare her. I didn't ghost her to create drama. I left because I finally saw the truth. She didn't love me. She didn't even like me. And maybe the worst part? I still loved the version of her that didn't exist anymore. The next day, I bought a prepaid phone and created a new email address. I transferred what little savings I had into a separate account. Quiet steps. One after another. I wasn't running. I was rebuilding slowly, like someone learning to walk again after being paralyzed for years. And just when I thought I could breathe again, my burner phone lit up. Unknown number. One message. Where are you? That was all she wrote. I didn't respond. But I knew something was coming. And I wasn't wrong. I didn't answer her text. Not because I was trying to hurt her. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her to beg. I just didn't want to be found. I had spent the better part of a decade trying to be visible to her emotionally, mentally, even physically. And she had perfected the art of looking through me. So now, for once, I gave her what she always treated me like, a man who wasn't there. But I knew Sienna. The silence would bother her. Not because she missed me. No, it would bother her because she didn't control the narrative. And control, that was her currency. Whether it was her job, her looks, or our marriage, she always had to be the one holding the reins. And now I'd cut the strings. Quietly. Permanently. It took exactly 48 hours for the second message to arrive. This one was longer. From a new number. Same clip tone. This isn't funny, Dwight. Are you trying to embarrass me? At least tell me where you are. We need to talk. That last sentence? We need to talk. That's rich. Where was that energy when she was sipping cocktails with her boss and laughing about how forgettable I was? I didn't respond. But something shifted inside me. I started to wonder, how far would she go now? What happens when someone like Sienna realizes her husband disappeared without yelling, breaking, or groveling? Without even leaving a dramatic scene to blame on him? I stayed in that motel for another 2 nights, eating vending machine granola bars and watching rain fall from the window. The phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. Somehow, she tracked down my new address. The subject line read simply, "Urgent." I clicked it open. "You're making this worse than it needs to be. If you're trying to humiliate me in front of my coworkers or ruin my professional image, it won't work. Please stop acting like a child. Come home, and we can discuss this like adults. I told you that party wasn't what you think it was. No apology. Not even a hint of remorse. Just damage control." But that phrase, "wasn't what you think it was," nearly made me laugh out loud. I heard her. I wasn't thinking anything. I was there. I watched her pretend I was a stranger. I heard her call me a placeholder. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was intent. That was who she really was when I wasn't supposed to be listening. And I realized something even darker. Sienna wasn't scared I left because she missed me. She was scared someone else, someone like Marlon, might find out I left because of her. That was her real panic. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I took control of the story. I opened a new document and started typing. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an attack. It was a timeline. A record. Every red flag. Every strange phone call. Every time she slipped out for after-hours meetings. I didn't plan to share it yet, but I needed to have it. Not to ruin her. Not even to protect myself in court. I needed it because for the first time, my version of the story mattered. I was done being edited out of my own life. But while I was documenting, something strange happened. An email popped up. Not from Sienna. From a name I didn't recognize. Subject: "You need to know what she's planning." Inside was a phone number. A single line of text. "I work at her firm." And I overheard everything. My breath caught. My hands hovered above the keyboard. Suddenly, this wasn't just about me disappearing. It was about what she was going to do next. I stared at that message for a long time. "I work at her firm." And I overheard everything. My brain went into overdrive. Who was this? Why would anyone at her company risk contacting me, especially if they were still working under the same roof as Sienna? I had so many questions I couldn't breathe. The walls of that motel room suddenly felt smaller. I could hear the buzz of the flickering light above the mirror. A part of me hesitated. This could be a trick. A trap. Something Sienna orchestrated to lure me back with just enough drama to paint herself as the victim. But something about the message felt real. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with insults or desperate pleas. It was short, direct, and it came from a company domain linked to her firm. So I picked up the burner phone and called the number. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then someone answered with a whisper. "Dwight." Her voice was tense. Female. Young. She didn't give me a name, and I didn't ask for one. "I can't talk long," she said quickly. "I've already deleted this message from the company system, but I need you to know something. Your wife, she's trying to cover what happened at the party. She told people you had a mental episode and wandered off. She's framing it as if you've been unstable for a while. She even said you've done this before." My knees nearly buckled. I sat on the edge of the bed, mouth dry. "What?" "She's rewriting your marriage like it was all chaos and emotional abuse. She told Marlon and HR that you've been controlling, paranoid, and unpredictable. She said you lashed out at her in front of everyone and vanished. People are starting to believe her because, well, you did vanish." My ears rang. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Because I've seen this before, she finally said. She's done it before. To someone else. But not to a husband. To a colleague. A woman. She manipulated everyone until that woman had no choice but to quit. It was ugly. But this is worse. She's trying to build a case to freeze you out of your finances, Dwight. If she gets ahead of the narrative, she can paint herself as the victim and get everything. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I felt like my heart had been replaced with ice. She's meeting with her legal rep tomorrow, the woman added. You still have time. But not much. And then she hung up. Just like that. I stared at the screen, her number still glowing in my hand. Everything around me blurred. The motel wallpaper, the noisy AC, the cracked lamp by the bedside. It was all just noise now. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a full-blown strategy. I knew Sienna was capable of lies. I knew she was cruel. But what I hadn't fully understood until now is that she had been preparing for this. Not reacting, preparing. She had a story, a villain, and she had chosen me to play the role. And I had almost walked away too quietly, too invisibly. But now I had a witness. And I had to decide what I was going to do with the truth. Because the woman I married was already burying me alive, in paperwork, perception, and public image. And if I didn't act soon, I'd vanish for real. I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid of what Sienna might do, but because I couldn't stop thinking about how deliberate it all was. How calculated. Every move she made, every word she said at that party, every lie she was weaving now, none of it was heat of the moment. This wasn't someone who made a mistake. This was someone who had been setting the stage for months, maybe years, to burn down the life we'd built together and walk out looking clean. I sat at the motel desk, hunched over the cheapest prepaid laptop I could find, and opened a blank document. For the first time in my life, I stopped thinking like a husband. I stopped trying to be the bigger man. And I started writing. I didn't know if I was writing a defense, a letter, a confession, or a legacy. But I knew one thing, it had to be honest. Brutally honest. If she wanted to paint me as unhinged, I was going to show people exactly what quiet looks like when it starts screaming. I wrote everything. From the moment we met, our awkward conversations, our road trip across the Midwest, the first time she cried in front of me, to the slow, creeping rot that entered our marriage once Marlon appeared. I wrote about the party she stopped inviting me to, the passwords she suddenly changed, the excuses, the fake conference weekends, the cold eyes across the dinner table, the scent of cologne that didn't belong to me lingering on her coat. I wasn't cruel in what I wrote, but I was real. I included dates, receipts, screenshots I had quietly saved when her stories didn't add up. I included the full transcript of that overheard conversation at the party. I even noted what she wore, how she smirked when she called me forgettable. Then I added the warning I got from the anonymous woman. Her name still unknown. Her voice still stuck in my ears like a siren in fog. By the time the sun rose, I had a 26-page document sitting on my desktop titled simply, My Side of the Story. I emailed it to myself. I saved 3 copies, cloud storage, encrypted drive, and printed to PDF on a USB key I now kept in my wallet. Not because I planned to use it, but because I refused to be erased. Around noon, my burner phone buzzed again. Another email from Sienna. Subject: We need to settle this like adults. Stop hiding. The message inside was worse than I expected. She wrote about mental decline, how I'd refused therapy, how I had a pattern of emotional instability. She even mentioned a fabricated story about me once breaking down during a work trip she'd supposedly arranged for me. I'd never even taken that trip. She was building a false history of me, a paper trail of things that never happened, so if things ever went to court, or she needed to justify her actions to her boss, she'd have a perfect case of a man unraveling. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. Then I did something that surprised even me. I replied. I wrote exactly one sentence. Thank you for showing me who you really are. That was it. No emotion. No name calling. No defense. Then I turned off the phone, sealed it in a padded envelope, and mailed it to my brother in another state with a sticky note that said, Hold on to this. Don't ask questions yet. I was done reacting. Now I was preparing. And the next step wasn't going to be about Sienna anymore. It was about me. About becoming someone I recognized again. Because the woman I loved didn't exist anymore. But maybe the man I used to be before her still did. A week passed. 7 full days without hearing her voice, without seeing her eyes try to manipulate me, without pretending we were still something worth saving. I'd settled into a strange routine in that bland little motel room, coffee that tasted like regret, quiet mornings, slow walks through nearby woods just to feel human again. I was rebuilding from dust, and strangely, it felt more honest than the life I'd left behind. But I knew the silence wouldn't last forever. And sure enough, it didn't. It started with a phone call to my brother. She must have tracked the return address from the burner phone I mailed him. When he answered, she apparently launched into hysterics, screaming that I was in danger, that I was off my meds, that I'd been disappearing into conspiracy thinking. My brother didn't buy it for a second. He told her I was fine, that she needed to respect space, and then hung up. Her next move was darker. She reached out to my employer. Not directly, of course, she wasn't that careless. She used a fake Gmail address to send an anonymous, concerned citizen message to HR, claimed I had been seen talking to myself in parking lots, that I had lashed out at strangers, that I posed a risk to clients. Luckily, I'd already filed my leave of absence weeks earlier, and my manager flagged the email as malicious. But it was clear, she wasn't trying to find me because she missed me. She was trying to erase me from the map. Personally, professionally, legally, whatever she could reach, she was trying to stain. That's when it finally hit me. She wasn't in damage control mode. She was hunting. Because if I wasn't around to tell my side, she could say whatever she wanted. That night, I made a decision. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't interested in exposing her publicly or sending her emails to her boss or releasing recordings. I wasn't going to fight fire with fire. That's what she'd expect. Instead, I printed out my 26-page document, the one I'd written in the motel, and I mailed 3 copies. One to my attorney, one to my brother, and one to her mother. Her mother, God bless her, always knew something was off. We'd never been close, but she saw how Sienna's eyes changed when she didn't get what she wanted. I didn't include insults. No accusations. Just the truth. Every sentence, backed by time, dates, events, screenshots, and audio transcripts. It wasn't spite. It was a record. A quiet, nuclear archive that said, I was here. I existed. I loved her. And this is how she ended me. A day later, the motel manager knocked on my door. A man in a wrinkled flannel with tobacco on his breath. There's someone asking about you, he said quietly. Said she was your wife. My chest tightened. I told her we don't give out guest info, he added. But I figured you should know. She looked mad, like she expected to find you in tears. I nodded, thanked him, closed the door, and sat back down. She had come this far. She'd driven to a tiny no-name town. Searched motels. Knocked on doors. Trying to find a man she pretended not to know at her boss's party. How poetic. But here's what she didn't know. I wasn't going to be at any of those places. Because I'd already left the night before. Everything was already boxed. Everything prepaid. I was headed somewhere new. Not just physically, but mentally. She was chasing the ghost of the man she tried to erase. But what she didn't realize, that man no longer existed. And someone else, someone stronger, quieter, smarter, had taken his place. I never saw her again. Not in person. Not in court. Not even through a screen. And the strangest part? I didn't need to. After the motel, I moved 3 states away to a quiet coastal town I'd visited once as a kid. The kind of place where people still wave at you from porches, and the coffee shop owner learns your name in a week. I rented a small cottage by the water. White paint chipping from the windowsills, seagulls tapping at the roof at sunrise. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. More real than anything I'd known in years. I started rebuilding slowly. I found a job helping restore old boats, something I'd never done before, but my hands needed something steady. I met people who didn't know me as Sienna's husband, or the guy who vanished. They knew me as Dwight. Just Dwight. And that was enough. Occasionally, I'd get updates through my brother. Sienna had gone quiet after the letters landed. She didn't respond to the document I sent her mother. But I was told she looked rattled. Word got out in her office that something had happened between us, something she couldn't quite control. People began to ask questions. Quietly. Respectfully. And when no answers came, they stopped asking. Eventually, she stopped trying. I never pressed charges. Never dragged her name through the mud. I could have. There were days I fantasized about it, about standing in a courtroom and reading her words back to her. But every time I imagined it, I felt the same thing. Tired. So I let it go. Not for her. For me. And as the months rolled on, I found peace in the ordinary. There was a woman at the bookstore downtown named June. A former nurse with silver streaks in her hair and a laugh that made people turn around. We talked every Saturday over paperbacks and lemon muffins. Nothing romantic. Not yet. But when she smiled at me, I didn't feel invisible. I started journaling again. I joined a small reading group at the library. I learned how to cook something other than frozen meals. I watched the ocean more than I watched my phone. And slowly, I remembered what it felt like to exist without apology. One morning, I found a note on my front porch. No name, no signature. It said, the best thing she ever did for you was letting you go. And they were right. Sienna didn't break me. She set me free.